Let's now take a look at some of these controls inside the rig. Just looking at it here, it looks pretty complex, but I think they've done a pretty good job of breaking it down so you can turn things on and off as needed. And what I mean by that is here in the side panel under the Item tab, you've got these rig layer buttons. And these buttons correspond to these layers over here in the Rig Object Data Properties panel. And so if I say turned off this face secondary grouping here, I'll just click here and turn that off. You can see it turned this one off here. So these things correspond to these layers. They just put a human readable form on them so that you can tell what they are. I'm going to press Shift and click and turn that back on, and you can see it turn back on here. So that's all these are. And you can see that we've got face primary, so that's the red controls, face secondary, which are all the yellow controls. And do you remember where all the joints were on the face? That's pretty much where all the red and yellow controls are now. So we can turn off face secondary, at least for now. We're not going to need them immediately. These little blue circles here are the tweak controls, and they're for stretching the character in a cartoony way if you wanted to do that. So we could grab this and hit G and move it, and you can see how it kind of stretches those controls. This allows you to stretch the limbs and the torso and get cartoon-like squash and stretch from your 3D character. Now, I'm not going to be using these too much for the animation that we're going to be doing here. So what I'll do is just go through and turn off all of the tweak armature layers. So I'll turn this one off, and the arm tweak here. I'll turn this one off here, this tweak here. I'll turn the leg tweak off and the right tweak off too. Oh, and it looks like I accidentally turned off the root, so I'll turn that one back on as well. So now we've got those turned off. We can also come in here and you can see we've got the main controls here, these main finger controls that are controlled by scaling. So if you hit the S key and scale, you can see those finger joints bend like that. And also if you hit the R key, you can bend the whole thing like this. So just having this control is pretty good. You can get the vast majority of your finger movements animated with just these controls. So what I'm going to do is just turn off the fingers detail for now. There we go. And I think that's all we'll need most of the time. Now, the next thing you may want to do is turn off the FK or IK controls. So depending on how you're going to animate, how you are most comfortable animating a character, you may want to turn these off or on. So you can see we've got arm IK, arm FK, and that stands for inverse kinematics and forward kinematics. And that just describes in what order the joints are bent to position the limb. Let's say I want to use inverse kinematics to control the arm here. So if I take this hand control and I hit G and I move it like this, actually let me turn the tweak for the arms back on just so you can see this a little bit better. If I hit the G key and move this control around, you can see that the shoulder joint and the elbow joint are moving and bending along with the hand control. So it's actually calculating the rotation of the shoulder and the elbow based on where you're putting the hand. And what this is doing is it's doing the calculation inversely up the chain. In other words, it's going this way to calculate the rotations. So it's inverse kinematics. Whereas if I were to use forward kinematics, you can choose these green controls here, here, and here. And let's say I wanted the hand to be down here somewhere. Well, what I'd need to do in this method is hit the R key and bend the shoulder down, and then take this and bend the forearm, and then I get the hand placed where I want it to be. So the calculations are being done forward down the chain, forward kinematics. So That's basically a very quick explanation between inverse kinematics and forward kinematics. And what I'm going to be doing for this short little animation is using inverse kinematics for both the legs and the arms. So I'm going to turn off FK here and turn off FK here. Now, 99% of the time, you're going to be using inverse kinematics for a character's legs, mainly because when you do, the end of the chain stays put. So if I hit the G key with the torso control selected here, you can see those foot controls stay planted on the ground, and that's what we want when we're moving the character around and they're walking or jumping or whatever. You really want to be able to plant the foot and have it stay there through an action. We also want to be able to change the shape and position of some of these controls. This character is a little bit wider than a normal character, I think. The proportions of it is very different than a realistic human. And let's say I'd like this control to stick out beyond the character, in the front and the back. To do that, we're going to need to use these widgets here, because ultimately the widgets are what dictate the size and position of these control objects. But we don't want to accidentally select them and change their position and size, and that's why this is grayed out, so we can't get to it. And you can see here that it's grayed out, but the eye icon is still enabled here. This particular hide feature isn't what's being used to hide the widgets. To get to these widgets, we need to come up here to this menu, and we need to turn on the display in viewports toggle here. So I'll click this. And now we have a new collection, a new column of toggles here. And you can see it's been disabled in the viewport here. So we need to turn that on to be able to see all the widgets. And in doing that, you can see all these relationship lines. And these are basically telling us what object the widgets are parented to. And we don't need to see all of these by any means. So I'm just going to come over here to the overlays and turn off relationship lines. There we go. All right, so in the next video, we will go through the process of modifying the size and position of a couple of these controls, just so you can see how it's done in case you want to make any of these kinds of changes on your character.